Hello, Tech Pros, episode 250.
You've got something great that you could share with the world, and you've got a medium now that you can do that.
Welcome to the podcast where we explore the opportunities, challenges, and anxieties that technical professionals and techpreneurs face when building their career, building their products, and building their business. This show is about the people behind technology and the mindsets and skill sets they developed that led to their success. You can learn more about this podcast and our guests at hellotechpros.com and about overcoming social anxiety at anxietynerd.com. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce again our featured guest today, Tom Schwab. Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Chad, I am thrilled to be back here. It's always fun to talk, and the time goes too quick. So hopefully everybody will enjoy this conversation as much as our previous one.
Absolutely. Tech Pros, if you haven't already checked out Tom's prior interview on Hello Tech Pros, you can go to hellotechpros.com/241. That was episode 241. And Tom and I talked about why it's so important as a business owner, as a product developer, to get on the streets and start marketing your products and marketing your business. You know, sometimes as technical professionals, we just want to do the stuff, right? We just want to do the techie stuff. But it's really important to get out there and share with the world your great idea, your great passion, your great business that you've got going on. And so please go check out episode 241. That's hellotechpros.com/241. If you haven't listened to that episode, let me reintroduce Tom for you. So Tom Schwab knows how to build an online business. Marketing as its heart is starting a conversation with someone who could be an ideal customer. And Tom helps small business owners, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and technical professionals get featured on leading podcasts their prospects are already listening to. Then he shows them how to turn those listeners into customers. And Tom, that was a great conversation that we had a few weeks ago about doing just that. Today, I thought I would bring you back and talk about more of the nuts and bolts, more of the technical aspects of how we specifically, tactically, like how do we do that? What are the first, second, third, fourth steps in order to, really land awesome podcast hosts and spread the word about your message, spread the word about your product and your new software you're developing, and just kind of build your name out there in the world.
And Chad, this is where I love to go because I get into the techie stuff, and give me an opportunity and I will go right there. Unfortunately, most people are like, don't go there because I'm an engineer by heart. I always say that, my first job out of college was running a nuclear power plant, and I've run a nuclear power plant and a small business. And one of them was easy because it came with the instruction manual. And so that's what, I've always looked at life like a geek or a nerd. I can never remember which one I am. But from the standpoint of let's just build a system that works. Let's optimize it. Let's tweak it. And then let's just, run it at maximum output. And so that's really what we've done really over the last 3 years. We've had over 100 different clients that we've worked through this, 3,000 separate interviews, and always been testing and saying, okay, what gives us the best, return? What gives us the best traffic? What gives us the best click-through rate? Always building that system and tweaking it. And that's what we share now. That's what the book has in it. But with that, I love the tech people because they understand that once you got the system, all you've got to do is run it. What's frustrating at times is the people that say, well, I just want to do an interview. And that's like just saying, well, I only want to do one part of the machine, or I want to only do one part of the recipe. And, if you're building a car and only interested in the engine, and you leave out the transmission and the drivetrain and all the rest of that, you're not going to like the results you get with it. So the tech pros will definitely understand the step-by-step how one builds on the other.
And I've had the really awesome honor to inspire some of my audience to start their own podcasts. And it's been such a blessing for me to see them kind of get that inspiration and to start building and to start launching their podcast. But let me tell you, launching a podcast is a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. As opposed to being a guest on a podcast, there's still a lot of work, but you can spread the word on multiple podcasts and be in front of other people's audiences without having to grow your own. So I think this is going to be a great conversation today, and feel free to geek out and get as technical as you would like, because brother, we all love it here on Hello Tech Pros.
Well, I was half calling this, the 4-hour work week podcast edition, but I'm thinking, no, Tim Ferriss has got a big podcast that I'd love to be on someday, and he's also probably got lawyers, so I probably shouldn't use that. But really, it is the hack to get maximum output, maximum results with minimum input. So, with that, and I always say there's no secret to it. There's no secret to how a car engine works. There's no secret to, even recipes that you make. You can go to the internet, you can find them. Really, can you follow it? Do you want to follow it? And what parts do you really want to do? So I'm excited to get into that.
All right, well, let's jump into it. So you said we don't want to just say, hey, I want to be on a podcast. I want to be a guest on somebody's podcast. Can I be on it? Let's do the interview. Great, I'm done. It's over. And wait for the results to come in, right? So what's the first step? What should we do right out of the gate?
Sure. So really, there's 6 steps, and it's easy for me to remember. They all start with a P. The first one is prospecting. Be very, very, very clear on who you want to talk to. You don't want to talk to the entire world. You just want to talk to those people who could be ideal customers. And let me give you this example. I'll ask people, would you rather have 5 minutes to talk at the Super Bowl, or would you rather talk to 1,000 ideal customers? And unfortunately, people would say they see the numbers and they're like, oh, I'd rather talk for 5 minutes at the Super Bowl. And it's like, you would get so many people mad at you. They don't care about your product, your service, whatever. You would be an interruption for 5 minutes, and you'd be more infamous than you were famous. Better to sit down with 1,000 people for a half hour that could be your ideal customers. And that's one of those things that we fight with going on to a podcast. And people will say, well, I want to be on this great big podcast. And what we have found is that the podcasts that do best are the ones that are really targeted, the ones that have your listeners there that want to hear what you're having to say. From personal experience, I was on a podcast one time, 50,000 downloads. I was thrilled to be on there, but at the end of the day, it was a diverse audience. I got about 24 leads from it. Shortly thereafter, I was on a podcast, and the host apologized because she only had 300 downloads per episode. Well, Chad, I was amazed because I got 150 leads from that, and it ended up selling $25,000 worth of product.
Wow.
So there's more fish in the ocean than there are in a barrel. But boy, if you're fishing and you can find a barrel full of the fish that you like, always go there. So I would say that prospecting too, start looking for where are those small barrels of your ideal customers. And you can go to iTunes and look for new and noteworthy. Just don't look at the top ones or the popular ones. Start scrolling down and find ones that are so niche that it'd be ideal for you. I heard somebody the other day talk about pickleball. I had never heard of it before in my life.
Nope.
I guess I
have no idea what that is.
It's like an indoor tennis with a wiffle ball, and I should probably look it up. But what they pointed out to me is there are 6 podcasts on wiffle ball or on pickleball, and I guarantee you, anybody that likes pickleball probably listens to those podcasts. So once again, you'd be better, if you want to sell something to pickleball enthusiasts, don't go on Hello Tech Pros.
Yeah,
I don't care if there's 1,000 times as many people on there. You're not going to be talking to your audience. So prospecting is so important. Laser down. It's a rifle approach to who you want to talk to. So spend time prospecting first.
I love that one, Tom, because I've talked to so many entrepreneurs, and really I have struggled with this a lot starting my first business or being a entrepreneur for years and years before I really launched my first businesses. Who am I talking to, right? I have these ideas of this product and the service and the software, but who am I actually selling it to? And I have fallen into the trap of wanting to pitch it to everybody, want to tell everybody about it because, gosh, it's just so wonderful to me. But just as you pointed out, like there's only a small portion of people that are actually passionate about that same interest, about my personal pickleball, whatever that is, right? About Hello Tech Pros. And so it's really about finding those customers, finding those clients, finding those audience members that are like-minded, that are going to resonate with that message. I love it. All right. So what's step number 2 after prospecting?
And this is one that should be near and dear to your heart, Chad: pitching. I mean, I'm sure you have seen some awful pitches. And also if you want to be a guest, put yourself in the position of the podcast host. Nobody likes a cold email. Nobody likes a cold call. And if you want to sell somebody, the first thing you shouldn't do is say, hi, I am Tom, and this is what you can do for me. No, just put yourself in the host position when you pitch. So here's the secret to do it. Find these ideal podcasts. Find 5 podcasts, in your prospecting there. Then listen to them. Then leave a rating and review. Make a couple comments on it. When they post something on social media, retweet it. Make a comment. Like it on Facebook. Do that for a couple of weeks, and then reach out to the host and say, hey, my name is Tom, and here's what I could bring to your audience, and here's how I think I could be of service to your community. I guarantee you, I don't care if it's even a big podcast, if you have left them a rating and review, if you had shared things, if you engaged with them beforehand, it's not a cold call anymore. They will know who you are. And I see way too many people trying to do the spray and pray, whereas I'm going to hire a VA to just go out and spam 100 podcasts, and they wonder why they don't get any interviews. Whereas if they would have just focused on 5 and really pitched them well, they would have been on all 5. Someday I'm going to put out a blog or a book or something with all of the worst pitches that I've ever seen. And people forward them on to me. The podcast host that talks about career things and doesn't have guests. And he gets pitched all the time. He showed me one, and it was like, "Dear ma'am or sir,
wow.
I want to talk to your guests about real estate investing." And he's just like, clearly they don't know, if Dan is a male or a female, and know nothing about my show. So good pitching can make all the difference in the world.
Man, talk about dropping the ball. Absolutely. The folks who have come in and engaged with me, especially like as a newbie podcaster, and now as I've grown up over the last 200x number of podcast episodes, I've seen a lot of different pitches, and the people that just seem like they have a little bit of interest in the show, right? They've listened to a few episodes, right? They're commenting on the episodes, they're retweeting on social media, they're leaving a review. It gives me those goosebumps, those little touchy-feelies, like, oh, Tom cares. Like he's out there, he's a real person, he's not just a spammer. And then when that Tom or that somebody else says, hey, Chad, I would love to talk to your audience about XYZ, or I'd love to talk to you about this that might be good for your audience. What do you think? And then we can get on a scoping call, or we can just email back and forth. And then we're like-minded, really close, right? Because I have, I respect this person because they have shown that they respect me. And it's not like just they're trying to make money off of me and my audience and all the work that I've put into it and all the time that the audience is sitting there listening to. So absolutely respect the interviewer, respect their audience, and look for ways to engage them and be personable before you start that pitch.
And that really, people they want to skip those steps, but there's another step that you don't want to skip, and that's the third one, and that's preparation.
Okay.
A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking to a live audience, and it was a great talk and everything. But as I had to admit to him, as I was looking out over there was like 75 people, and I'm like, I have never been on a podcast where I've spoken to this few of people. And I didn't want to discourage them or belittle them in any way. But when you go on a podcast, you better remember that you're going to be talking to 1,000, 10,000 people, because some people just say, well, it's just a conversation. It's just Chad and I talking. Well, you better do your preparation on that. And preparation is so important. And what does this mean? This means you better listen to a few interviews to get the feel for it, to get the tone of it. If there's a question that's always asked, the right answer is not, I've never thought about that. Because what you just said is, I've never listened to this podcast before. And so you've got to do that preparation. You would never go out in front of a crowd of 1,000 people and have no idea who they are, or what value you could bring to them, what questions could be asked. Most people would be scared to death to go out in front of 1,000 people if they were prepared, but yet some people will go on podcasts totally unprepared. And the preparation always goes for, how can you prepare the host also? I'll be honest, Chad is a busy guy. He's got a business, a family. I don't expect that he's going to spend the last day trying to figure out, I wonder who Tom Schwab is, and can I spend all this time preparing for it? So make it easy for them also. And there's things that you can do, like a one-page pitch sheet, that has your picture that they need for the show notes. It's got all your contact information. It's got your bio. Maybe it's got some typical questions they could ask you. So make sure that you prepare the host also for a great interview, because what you don't want is two strangers getting together for the first time when the record button hits. Do the preparation there, and that makes for the great performance, which is really the next step.
So I love that. And before we get to the next step, I would also say, hey, take a look at the host website, right? Take a look at the podcast website and see what they're publishing about their guests and about their episodes. So anything that you can do to provide that host with that information, just like Tom said, a one sheet, your bio, your picture, whatever it is that host is publishing on their website, they're going to need. And if it takes them, just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds to put that information together, as opposed to you just handing it to them and say, hey, here it is, no work needed on your part, just copy and paste and we're good to go. Man, they will be so appreciative, because I don't have to look up your bio on LinkedIn. I don't have to try to find a picture and try to ask you permission to reuse it, right? You're just providing me all the information, and it makes it so much easier. So absolutely do that preparation. All right, once we're prepared, we have prospected, we have pitched, we have found those 5 ideal podcasts, we know what the audience wants to hear. What's next?
Now is the performance. Now is your time to, as somebody said, Sinatra only sang. So this is the part that only you can do, that nobody else, that you can't delegate. This is your time to get up in front of the microphone and shine. And I would say with that, there's a lot of things that you can do. So from the standpoint, the first one's the microphone. There's nothing more important than how you sound. If you sound like you're an expert that's calling in from the bathroom, no one's going to take you seriously. And just before Chad and I got on here, I said, 1 second, I got to do a microphone check, because how you sound is so important. And we've got a checklist that I use, and I'll share with everybody here. And it's all the different things that could go wrong. So your performance is, before you get on a call, restart your computer. Make sure that it's got an Ethernet hardwired in, so you've got the best connection. Make sure you're using a good microphone. And when I first started out, I would use just the earbuds, and those were decent. Then I went up to just a $79 microphone that sounded great, and now I've got the professional sounding microphone. But always make sure that the computer is picking up the right one. There's other things you can do also, and for the performance, and that's going through and turning off all the notifications, and all the little things that I didn't think about at first, but it'll be in the in that checklist, is Dropbox. I was on one interview one time. It was going great. And then all of a sudden, one of my assistants sent me a video file that I'd been asking for, and the bandwidth went away. So all of those little things for your performance that can make it great. And you've got one chance here. Other little things that we put in the checklist are record the interview too. I always do a backup recording, because boy, if we had this great conversation and then something goes wrong with Chad's recording, I don't want that to be lost. So just by hitting, a call recorder at the beginning, you've got a backup call. And those are those little things that you can do that will make your performance, make your interview the best it can be. And there's other things too. Is just remember what your purpose is for being on the interview. You're not there to sell. If you want to get an interview that never sees the light of day, start making it sound like an infomercial. It's insulting to the host. It's insulting to the audience. Your job there on your performance is to make the host look like a genius for having you on, because you were sharing so much information. Your whole goal there is to get people to know, like, and trust you, and really take them to the next step, which is the progression.
And the job of the host is to make the guest member look like an absolute rock star, right? Because if the guest is helping us out and making us look like a professional podcast host, like a professional radio star, right? When really we're just sitting in front of our computer on a silly mic, talking to our buddies, but they turn it around and make us look like an absolute professional. We turn it around, make them look like a rock star. It's a win-win for everybody. And oh my gosh, Tom, let me tell you, after 200 plus episodes, everything that can go wrong technically has gone wrong technically with an episode sooner or later on this show. We've had Skype, I can't tell you how many times, drop out. We've had where I forget to punch the record button and we are 20 minutes into the podcast before I realize that we haven't recorded a darn thing. We've had internet connectivity problems. We've had, alerts and notifications and phone calls buzz in. We've had, like you said, those microphones that just sound like they're calling from Mars, the dark side of the moon somewhere out there, like over a I don't know what kind of internet connection, but the worst possible ever. And it's just like not a good experience for the audience. And I know there are people that say, oh, wow, that's an interesting title. Let me listen to, oh, God, my ears. No, I can't take anymore. And they sign off. And unfortunately, you'll lose the message. So if the performance is not there, if you're just preaching to the audience and you're not, engaging them, and worse, if those technical issues get in the way, people are busy. They've got too much time or not enough time to take care of all that stuff. They're just going to tune out and move on to something else.
And the thing is that you want them to engage, to listen, because as you're talking, you want them to engage even more. And that's really where the progression comes. And let me do a little behind the scenes or behind the curtain. So I was going to do it in the last step, but I thought, no, I'll put it here. So remember when I was talking about all the mistakes I've made, and I've got a checklist that I use for all of this?
Yep.
Well, this is a point where everybody's going through, and if you're trying to write down all of these steps, I know people listen to podcasts at 2 times speed. They're listening while they're jogging right now or driving to work. You are not taking notes as we talk. So make it easy for the person to get the information you're talking about. And so throughout the podcast, talk about different resources that would help them. A lot of times in digital marketing, we talk about things as being lead bait. Well, there's also things like visitor bait, and this is the progression that you can put throughout the interview. So let me give you a couple examples. At the very beginning of this, I could have said, hey, there's the 6 steps, and if you want an infographic on that, just go back. We've got all this written down. Just go back to interviewvalet.com/techpros, and everything Chad and I talk about will be there. Okay, so that would have been a reason for them to go from being a listener to a visitor. Mm-hmm. I could also talk about, hey, that checklist, all the stupid things that I have done to mess up a podcast. They say checklists are written in blood. Well, most of it is my type of blood. So you don't have to do that. You don't have to make your own mistakes. You can learn from this, and you can download. I'll make my checklist available to everybody. And once again, telling them just go to interviewvalet.com/techpros. And you can find that there. So what you're trying to do is get them from listening to visiting your site. And there's been so many great ways that we've had clients do this. We have one client that's an author. He did a virtual book tour, and this guy was a professional photographer, and he worked with WWE. He's taken pictures in almost every football, NFL football stadium, and Major League Baseball and hockey, all the rest of this. So every time he tells a story, there's a picture to go along with it. And he's so great because he'll just talk in there and he say, oh, yeah, and Chad, there's a great picture. I'll put this up on the website if you want to see it. And so it's a natural way to go there and to get to people to get more things there. There was another client that we had, and she made quilts. And, they would cut up race T-shirts and make quilts out of them.
Awesome.
And it was great because if she was on a sports podcast, she would say, yeah, we made a quilt for Wayne Gretzky and he sent us a bunch of his old jerseys and we cut them up and made a quilt out of it. And, if you want to see it, just go back to, and she would give the address there. Mm-hmm. And what red-blooded American man or Canadian wouldn't want to see what Wayne Gretzky's quilt would be? But yet, if she was on more like a mommy podcast, she might say, yeah, there was a mother that sent us all these baby clothes after her daughter had grown up, and we made a quilt out of them. And when her daughter grows up and has her first child, she's going to give her this as a gift. And if you want to see it, just come back to the site, and she would put that out. And, who wouldn't want to see that? So it was that context, and it wasn't just come back to my site and sign up for a newsletter. Nobody wants a newsletter, but if there's something that's a natural progression from the interview, why wouldn't they want to go there? And really, that's where we've seen a big difference. We worked with a lot of clients that said, I was on a dozen podcasts and they don't work. And you'd listen to them and you're like, yep, you were on a dozen podcasts and you gave them no reason to take the next step. So all of those things, just thinking, how can I help the person take the next step? And it's, like sales, you're not going to be able to talk about everything right there, but what's the next logical step with them? Maybe it could be, and as you're on an interview, you could say, hey, we've got a webinar coming up, or it's a recorded webinar. So even if you don't make it live, it'll be there. So people can take that next step. And some of it flies in the myth or the generally held understanding that like you're only supposed to tell them one thing, give them one offer. Our testing has shown that you should give them 3 different ways to say yes. So, it's a small yes, a medium yes, and a heck yes. So for me, maybe that small yes is, hey, get the infographic, download that checklist. Maybe the medium one is, hey, come to the website and there's a free 30-minute training on how to use this strategy. Maybe the big yes is, the commitment of, hey, you can come to the website and you can purchase podcast guest profits. You can, sign up for a free consultation. You just don't want to give them one way to say yes, because if it's a big yes, they might not be there at that point. And if it's just a little yes, you don't want to slow them down. If they hear you and want to engage with you, don't slow them down going through your sales funnel in order to engage with you. So all of that is that progression and intentionally thinking, how can I help people move from being a listener to a visitor to a lead and ultimately a customer?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway on that, Tom, is, podcasts are not intended to be a vanity metric, right? When you want to be a guest on someone else's show, there has to be a reason for being a guest on someone else's show. It's not just because, hey, I was on XYZ's show and now I look like a rock star and I'm famous, right? If that's what you're after, okay, cool. Like, no judgment, but how is that going to help your business? How is that going to help you market your service or your product or your software? There has to be a point for being a guest on that show. And it's not just about being a guest on the show. It's about helping that audience discover you and discover your product and service and really finding out more about it, right? So you have a few minutes or an hour or however long the podcast is to really engage with the guest, engage with the host and engage with the audience and really tease them a little bit about what's going on. But then there has to be that tie-in, that progression of here's how you can find out more, right? Here's how you can get my API. Here's how you can download a free trial version of the software. Here's how you can get my checklist for, doing XYZ in your company. And all those things that you can tease out on the episode, or just like, hey, really cool pictures. I had a really cool picture with Tom and we were hanging out and we were skiing and when we were doing some amazing things. You can go check it out on this episode. Whatever you can do to provide that audience with just a little bit more of an incentive to go, I want to learn more. I'm a little bit curious and I can't fulfill that curiosity here on the podcast episode. So you know what? After I get through running my mile here on my treadmill, then I'm going to go back to the computer. I'm going to check it out.
And Chad, you were so right. And if you think about it, think about different mediums. So when you see somebody on television, when they show up on, I'm going to date myself here, when they show up on Jay Leno or Oprah or something like that, it's not just because they stopped by to have a discussion. No, they had a discussion, and then there was a point to it. There was, come see my new movie that opens this Wednesday. Here's the new book, or, I'm speaking at this place. Even comedians, I'm on this comedy tour, check me out. There was always a reason for it. And in some ways it was self-promotion, they're on a business thing, but also helping your client. What's that next step that can help you? And I think we do a disservice if all of a sudden when we come on a podcast and it's like, that was interesting, but what's the next step? How can this person help me if I resonated with them? And it's not, email me or sign up for my newsletter or follow me on social media. It's really got to be something that's very pertinent to that discussion.
Yep. Give them something of value and they will engage with that. They will progress to that next level. All right. Speaking of the next level, let's see, I'm looking at my list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got prospecting, pitching, preparation, performance, progression. And we said at the beginning that there were 6 steps. What's the 6th and final step to nailing that podcast interview?
The final one is promotion. And, after you have done the interview, the podcaster is going to be promoting that. But boy, you should be promoting that yourself, because it's going to help the podcaster. It's going to help you. And remember, this is evergreen content. So just don't promote it once. Right now, we're recording this, 2017. I guarantee you there's going to be somebody in 2020 that listens to this for the first time and they're like, that's awesome. So make sure that you're putting that out to them. Always put this promotion in the evergreen content out there. And sometimes it can be a social media post, a Facebook post, a tweet. But there's other ways that you can promote this and repurpose the content. And there's so many great ways that I've seen people do this. You can take the interview and you can ask if you can put it on your own site. And a lot of podcasters will say, I don't care where they hear it. I just want them to hear about me. Now, it's granted, it's copyrighted material, so always ask. There's other things that you can do that are great. You can take, a short clip of that and put some B-roll footage up on it, and you just now have a great video that you can put up there to promote the interview and drive them back to the site to hear it there. You could transcribe that interview. For me personally, I'm not a great writer. Like I said, I'm an engineer, so writing doesn't come as natural to me. But as you know, I can talk. And so a lot of times I'll transcribe the interview. And, you can go to a site like rev.com, transcribe it for like $1 a minute. And we're talking here about most people talk about 150 words a minute. Think about it. That's, every 4 or 5 minutes, you've got a blog post there that you could take, give to somebody to rewrite and make blog posts out of it. They could do different word swags out of different things. If I talk long enough, I'll get 140 characters or genius, and there's something in here that's tweetable. So
Right.
all of those things that you can use to promote this and repurpose this content to get the most out of it, and all of those things will help you. It's almost like the supercharger or the afterburner on your interview to get the most out of each one.
So, Tom, what I love about that is there's so many different places to promote. And honestly, you can't do it all yourself. Like, as a podcast host, I can't be everywhere promoting my every episode in every different medium, because there's new mediums popping up all over the place. Where I really resonate with my audience is, number 1, Twitter, and number 2, everything else, right? And so I am on Twitter pretty hard, and I'm on Facebook a little bit and YouTube a little bit, but I'm not really doing a 100% effort there. However, if one of my guests want to promote on one of those other formats, one of those other mediums, or they create an Instagram, or they're talking about it on Snapchat, or they're wherever they're promoting it, that's going to do a double service for both the guest and the host, right? Because they're reaching a new audience that the host may not be reaching through their own social media posts, right? Because you're probably only posting to a certain audience in a certain kind of demographic on a certain tool. But if you start posting, if you, the audience member, or you, the guest, starts posting in other areas, then that's going to do everybody a great service.
And it's going to do you a great service to get on more podcasts, because it's sort of like a positive feedback loop. Okay, I'm geeking out now here, but if you're on a podcast and you have a good experience with it, and you promote the episode, chances are that podcast host is either going to invite you back. Maybe he'll recommend you to a few other podcasters that have similar podcasts, similar audiences. I tell you what, when you pitch that next podcaster, and he checks out your social media and sees that you promote the episodes that you're on, it's going to make it much, much easier for them to say yes. And so from that standpoint, I always, the analogy that I use is this is a recipe that we've created. And just like, you go to a restaurant and, they can make the meal for you, or you can make it yourself. And most of the time the recipes are out there, on the internet. So you have the choice of, hey, do you outsource this? Do you work with, a company like Interview Valet to help you with this, or do you do it on your own? The one thing I would say, though, is don't leave steps out of the recipe. And I can think of when I was in high school, I made a chocolate cake one time, and it was either baking soda or baking powder. I had no idea what it was. I didn't even like the taste of it. So I'm like, it's only, a teaspoon, a tablespoon, whatever it was. You can tell how much I bake. But it's like, it's not important. Well, I didn't like the results of it.
Right.
So you've got to follow the steps in this. So no matter if you try this yourself, if you try working with somebody to do it, either way, just follow the process there to get the same results.
Very wise words of wisdom. Speaking of words of wisdom, do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience? And then please share the best way that we can get a hold of you and Interview Valet, Tom, and then we'll say goodbye.
Sure, Chad. I'm thrilled to be here. And if you're listening to a podcast, you already know the power this medium has. Right now, they say 30 to 40% of the U.S. population listens to podcasts. Now, in the future, that's only going to grow as people can download it easier, download it to their cars, all the rest of that. Your customers, your ideal prospects are going to be listening to podcasts in the future. The only question is, are they going to be listening to you or your competitor? And you can decide that right now by either starting your own podcast, being a guest on other people's podcasts, or doing both. But either way, I would urge you've got something great that you could share with the world, and you've got a medium now that you can do that. And if we can be of any help or service in that, please reach out to us. Like I said, just interviewvalet.com/Tech Pros. Everything that Chad and I talked about will be on that page. It'll be the checklist that I use, the 6 steps to get booked on your first podcast, some information about the new book, Podcast Guest Profits, Grow Your Business with the Targeted Interview Strategy, and all my social media contacts will be there too. So once again, if you just go to interviewvalet.com/Tech Pros, I look forward to connecting with you.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value you breaking this down into the 6-step process, right? Because honestly, when you're first getting started, it's like, okay, there's a lot of social anxiety of just, can I reach out and ask to be a guest? Or ask to be a guest, and then what do I do? And then you start freaking out, and your mind starts going into that monkey mind mode where you don't know, what you're supposed to do once you get on there. But just really laying it out into the 6 steps: prospecting, pitching, preparation, performance, progression, promotion. Right now, you've got a framework. Now you've got a process that you can follow. And then you'll be a lot more clear when you get on the show. So I appreciate you breaking that down for us and getting into the nuts and bolts and engineering side of podcasting for us.
Thank you, Chad.
You bet. Tech Pros, if you want to be a guest on a podcast, it's easy to start. You just ask, right? There's all of these things, but when it comes down to the pitching, sometimes for me, that was always the most nerve-wracking part of it, right? How do I ask? Well, you just do it. It doesn't matter if it's on Twitter, if it's on email, if it's on the phone. You just have to have a conversation with someone. And if you've done your homework, if you've done your prospecting, you've done your preparation, the pitching is not as hard as it sounds. You just have to be brave enough to put that ask out there. If you would like to be a guest on this show, I'm always looking for new guest members to come on and talk about how to build your career, how to build your product, how to build your business. And I would love to talk to you about your perspective on any of those topics. Please reach out to me at hellotechpros.com/guest. You've been listening to Tom Schwab, and I'm Chad Bostic. And until next time, take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/250. Do you use Slack for team communication? Join the Hello Tech Pros Slack channel at hellotechpros.com/Slack. If this episode helped you out in any way, please leave a review on iTunes and let me know what you thought. iTunes reviews helps our rankings, which helps us grow the Hello Tech Pros podcast to a broader audience, which helps more technical professionals and techpreneurs build their career, build their products, and build their businesses. If you are a subscriber and get repeat value out of this show, consider becoming a sponsor on Patreon. The information on this podcast is free to everyone, but I'm giving you the opportunity to pay for the value you get out of it, starting as little as $1 a month. Pledge your support today at patreon.com/hellotechpros or visit hellotechpros.com/sponsor.